Hello everybody and welcome to another Darkest Dungeon mod overview. My name is Element5 and today we're taking a look at the Voivode. The Voivode is a brand new transformation class out by Carnifex and Von Krolock, which is a ton of fun and really plays on and is kind of a love letter to the sort of classic horror genre and Dracula. This class is really detailed and really neat. It plays a little bit like a build-up kind of assassination tank. It has two forms, its human form and then its form when it transforms into the Strigoi. And as it plays in the human form, its abilities stress it out over time, kind of feeding its hunger for souls until it finally transforms into the Strigoi and then is empowered by the level of stress and HP that it has. It also has with it a fun play on vampirism, given that it comes into the game with this interesting disease mechanic called Dark Brood, which then evolves into Darkspawn, and plays a little bit like the Crimson Curse. Essentially, you can camp with the Voivode and opt to drink its blood or serve its blood to a member of your party. That party member is then infected with the disease Dark Brood, and over time this will evolve and has all kinds of different effects associated with it, but essentially makes this sort of a vampire in its own right. Not only that, in addition to the Darkspawn mechanic, this class also comes with its own district mod known as the Cursed Ground. The Cursed Ground benefiting and empowering both the Succubus and the Voivode. The Succubus will be the next class we do, which is another transformation class by this team. Both are getting 15% damage when transformed. It makes Unholy Curios heal 15 stress and adds a death blow resist buff to anybody with the Darkspawn disease. So a lot of just really fun and interesting mechanics and theming with this class, and I've had a lot of fun with it so far. But let's talk about its background and its lore. Obviously, this is a class, as I said, that is sort of a love letter to the horror genre and Dracula, and that really truly is its inspiration. And according to the description on Steam, the Voivode was once lord of such a place like the Hamlet himself. Driven by fear of defeat, he delved into forbidden knowledge, sealed away by lords past. With the newly discovered old wisdom came curiosity, and with curiosity came thirst. With thirst came hunger, and with hunger, more hunger. And thanks to the awesome work of Von Krolock, we also get to feast our eyes on a nice backstory comic strip here, which starts up in the top frame as we see a bit of a riot happening here. The townsfolk with pitchforks raised storming the castle keep. A little bit of a close-up on the castle keep as we see something happening inside amidst a red glow of light. Upon closer inspection, we see the Count, the Voivode, performing some sort of a ritual in front of a cauldron. With arms raised in the air, powerful shadow magic pours out of the cauldron, eventually taking physical form, reaching out and offering a goblet to the Voivode. The townspeople now reaching the top of the keep, breaking in just as the Count reaches out, accepts the goblet, and takes a sip. And we see the reaction of the townspeople here as they're too late and the ritual is complete. The Count now transformed into the Strigoi. Just some really awesome storytelling here, gives a deeper sense of what this character is about. This harkens back right to classic films like the fearless vampire killers, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Fright Night, etc. And we're going to see here as we move forward and take a look at this class's abilities that each one of these abilities is really on point and on theme. But before we jump into what each individual ability does and how this character works, let's just take a snapshot at the resistances and the stats here. But for the most part, you know, decent max HP, 5 dodge, 4 speed, no accuracy, 5 to 10 damage, low crit. So max HP here is worth pointing out because it is kind of a primary stat for this class. It empowers certain things that it does when it's in its beast form, and it is also a guard class in human form. So because it has low dodge and no prot, it's important that its HP pool be a little bit higher as long as it is guarding and using shadow play, and we'll talk about that in a second. In terms of its resistances, slightly better than average across the board. The fact that it is, you know, an old Count, something that plays with powerful magic and darkness, means that it is slightly more resistant to disease and has slightly better bleed resistance than most classes. Of course, this at 0% because we have hemophilia here, which is kind of a bummer. But otherwise, slightly better resistances across the board. No trap disarm. The count will not be disabling traps anytime soon. Thank you very much. So just taking a quick snapshot here of the Voivode's kit and abilities. Like other transformation classes, this will come out of the stagecoach with all of these unlocked, which is kind of nice. And you have a transformation ability here, literally called Transform. You have your 3 sort of human mode abilities and then your Strigoi mode abilities back here. All of these in human form are going to do this down here, which is self plus stress. So that's sort of important to keep to take note of as we move forward here, is that if you're doing anything in human form, you are ramping up your stress bar until you finally transform into Strigoi, and then these abilities are not necessarily de-stressing the Voivode, but they are empowered by how much stress and HP the character has. So as you can see with this ability, plus 5% crit per 20 stress. So that is quite interesting. You're using your abilities in human form to build hunger and to ramp up the hunger for blood and souls, if you will. And then once you finally empower and release into the Strigoi form, now you're more empowered because you're more hungry. So the first ability then is Transform. Can only use this twice per battle, can use it in any position, and at level 2, this is self plus 5 dodge if transformed into Strigoi, and a 1-round buff of 30% damage versus mark. Other heroes, on the other hand, get 4 stress and a 2/4 horrify on transformation. If, on the other hand, you are in Strigoi form, and you retransform back to human, you take on a debuff of 10% stress, and other heroes have a 45% chance to clear horror and are stress healed -2. So there's a lot to say about this transform ability, and if we just compare it to that of the Abomination, which is also literally called Transform, you see that this is also uses per battle 2, stresses out other heroes when you transform, and then does a bit of stress heal when you come back to human form. So there's some similarities there, with a big caveat, which is down here, clear horror, 45% chance, which provides some interesting opportunities to use this as a horror clear versus enemies like a ghoul or madman, and is also a fairly decent combo with other heroes like Marvin Seo's Lamia, for example, or heroes that would apply horror effects and debuffs to your team.
The horror. Destroy them all.
So now that we understand what's happening when you transform from human to Strigoi and back, let's take a look at the first ability in the human kit, which is Flock of Bats. Flock of Bats is a ranged ability which can be used in position 2, 3, or 4 and attacks a single enemy in rank 2, 3, or 4. It has an accuracy base 95, a damage modifier of -80, so it's not going to be hitting very hard, but a crit modifier of +7, which is kind of interesting. This will bypass guard, has a 120% chance to bleed an enemy for 2/3, and as long as you land the bleed, or if the enemy is already bleeding, you will also mark the target. Note that it also comes with plus self 3 stress. So thematically, Flock of Bats obviously playing into the sort of Dracula transformation Strigoi theme here, but bypassing guard because a Flock of Bats is hard to guard against, and the high crit rating because according to Carnifex, the bats would have a decent ability to hit vital organs and important places, sensitive places on your enemy. So next in the human kit then is Obey. Obey can be used in position 1, 2, or 3. It is a ranged attack that targets any enemy in any position. An accuracy base 100, a damage modifier of -100%, so it is not supposed to do much damage. And it both stuns and pulls an enemy forward too, which is quite powerful. Again, self +3 stress. So I really love the thematic idea here, this sort of Dracula mental manipulation going on here. The pull and stun is very powerful. I think the stun percent chance here, not super high, but obviously you're going to see this ability being a lot more useful in dungeons like the Ruins or the Weald, where you want to get to that softer backline enemy and kind of get around the frontline prot. So last then in the human kit is Shadow Play. Shadow Play can be used in any position. It is a guard ally, reduce the torchlight by 10, activate Riposte on the Voivode. Every time that you hit with Riposte, the Voivode will take 4 stress, and you buff minus 12% damage received, as well as stealth the Voivode for 2 rounds. Now, a guard Riposte is very powerful, but as I said here, you not only kill the torch a little bit here, but you take on 4 stress every time the Riposte lands. So this can kind of get out of control. And while I have really seen a lot of utility out of this myself, I've also seen it be very punishing. So now that we've taken a look at the human kit and we've seen how each of these abilities sort of plays with the Dracula theme and ramps up the stress bar of the Voivode as you use them throughout the dungeon, let's talk about what happens when you go ahead and hit transform and now become the Strigoi, and that starts with Soul Feast. Soul Feast is a melee attack that is usable in position 2, 3, or 4, and it targets any enemy in position 1, 2, or 3. It will move you forward 1, so a little bit of shuffle once you get into Strigoi form here, as we'll see. It has an accuracy base 85, a crit modifier of minus 3%. This is an armor-piercing ability, and this is the really important piece here. Plus 5% crit per 20 stress, damage scales with HP, and heal 10% max HP. So this is sort of where I was talking earlier about max HP being a primary stat for this class, not only as a guard tank, but also in conjunction to how much damage you'll do with Soul Feast. Soul Feast is the only aggressive attack that you do in Strigoi form. Stuff like Things from the Stars just gets wrecked by this. It also self-heals, which is nice, so that's going to be bringing this HP back up after doing some Shadow Play. And you're getting more damage output with how much HP you have, which is pretty fun. So the next ability then in the Strigoi kit is Lurking Flight. Lurking Flight can be used in position 1, 2, or 3, and that is because it flies you all the way back to rank 4. It also stress heals minus 6, and buff self for a powerful 12% crit versus marked and 60% damage versus bleeding. It also buffs self for speed, which is interesting because that in many ways almost guarantees that you're going to be acting first or close to first at the beginning of the next round. So this is a slow ability. To use something that is just a self buff is a slow action, but the fact that what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for a huge attack next round against something that's marked or bleeding, and you're going to be using it probably in the beginning of that round. So the last Strigoi ability then is Echolocate. Echolocate is a ranged ability that can be used in any position, and it targets the entire enemy team. It can only be used once per battle, so you need to be really choosy about when you're going to use this. It has an accuracy base 95, it does no damage, but it has a 60% chance to mark each target, and it is a free action, which buffs the 4 accuracy per target hit, as well as ignores stealth. You are literally sort of the beast form of a giant bat as a Strigoi. You screech out into the night, and it doesn't even matter if the enemy is stealthed. you're going to be able to detect where they are. You have a 60% chance to mark that target, which is empowered by things like lurking flight or by when you transform and you get that 30% damage versus marked. And because it is a free action, you get to use it once per battle when you're going to land that one big hit with Soul Feast. Now that we understand what each individual ability does, let's just talk about general sort of group composition and strategy with the Voivode. Immediately you can kind of realize that this is a class that sort of jumps forward with Soul Feast and then back with Lurking Flight. So you want to think about bringing groups that work well with something shuffling in your party. The fact that Flock of Bats and Echolocate and Lurking Flight, I mean, we have a lot of mark synergy here. So playing with the Houndmaster or an Arbalist in the back is a really nice take along as well. The pull and stun ability out of Obey, just really powerful in Ruins and Wield where you want to reach that soft backline. But then you also have the Riposte ability coming out of Shadow Play. Not only self-stealths, but anytime you have a Riposte ability, typically useful against Crimson Court bosses that have multiple turns, enemies that are going to AoE your party, so things like Brigands, right, that basically do nothing but AoE attacks. Just keep in mind that all of these abilities are going to be ramping up this stress, and that is really an important piece to the Voivode. I have misplayed this class quite a bit on stream because I did not respect how much energy and resource management went into this stress bar. Now, having said that, that does, of course, empower the crit percentage of the primary Strigoi attack, but nonetheless, you still just really need to be keeping in mind when you're going to be going into Strigoi form and just obliterating something with high prot and doing so with high stress so that it hits super, super hard. Now, there are 5 unique camping skills that come with the Voivode, and they are all interesting and play very well with the sort of Dracula, you know, Beast of the Night theme. And that starts with Life in Death. Life in Death is a time cost 1, so pretty cheap. Self only, remove bleeding, remove blight. You get a heal 1/10 rounds, but a horror 2/20. So this is kind of an interesting ability because it does clean this class up. It is cost effective. And, you know, if you were to wear a trinket that is plus healing received, that heal 1/10 is going to be actually a lot more powerful than that. The horror 2 points over 10 also affected by trinkets if you had plus stress received on those trinkets, but that is also just a means for you to then ramp this up and move forward and get more output from Soul Feast. Next in the camping kit is Children of the Night. This one's pretty fun. Time cost 3, party reduce torchlight by 80, plus 15% virtue chance if the torch is below 40 for the next 4 battles, and minus 15% stress damage received if the torch is below 20 for the next 4 battles. However, both of these buffs are removed if the torchlight should go above those thresholds. Now, thematically, this is just a fun ability because if you camp with the Voivode, he actually turns into a wolf form, playing with, you know, sort of the classic horror theme, the Strigoi theme, which is pretty cool. And Children of the Night obviously meant then to empower your party to do very well in torchless runs, to work well in the shadows. Next is Away From Me. Time cost 2, self-only, minus 15 stress, minus 15% stress damage for the next 4 battles. All companions, if religious, plus 10 stress. So this class obviously not pairing well with other religious classes. In fact, won't even go with the Vestal on dungeon runs. So that's kind of important to note. But this is just obviously a cheap and sort of efficient way to bring the stress back down to manage that resource a little bit better and punish those religious companions who've come along for the ride. Now we're going to skip Unholy Baptism for the moment and talk about Impale the Fallen. Time cost 3, self-only, prevent nighttime ambush, minus 15% chance the party is surprised. All companions, if not religious, plus 10 stress, and if religious, plus 15. So, again, a fairly affordable prevent nighttime ambush. Does come with a reduction of chance party surprise, which is great, and then a decent stress punish, worse for those who are religious. But now let's talk about the most interesting camping skill and the introduction of a huge disease mechanic that comes with this, which is Unholy Baptism. Time cost 4, self only, bleed 3/3, produce a chalice. all companions, if religious, 15 stress. So what you are doing with Unholy Baptism is bleeding the Voivode and draining that blood into a goblet, into a chalice. Then you are taking that chalice as a provision, and you can either bring it home and store it in the provisions and use it later, but at some point you are going to choose to serve that chalice of blood to one of the members of your party and make them a dark brood. Give them the disease dark brood, okay, which evolves into Darkspawn and has all kinds of positive and negative stat modifiers, whether or not you are in high torch or low torch. Basically, you are feeding the Voivode's blood to a party member and turning them into a vampire to some respect. Now, just sitting in the hamlet, it will roughly take between 6 to 12 in-game weeks for the disease to evolve. And if you bring a dungeon to low light, it will increase that evolve rate, quickly powering this from Dark Brood to Darkspawn and then to Darkspawn Frenzy. And a character with Darkspawn Frenzy is going to act a little bit like a character with Crimson Curse. It will sometimes heal themselves, stress heal themselves, act out on their own, stress out other party members, block healing received, and interact with unholy curios. And of course, don't forget that, as we talked about on the beginning of the video here, the Cursed Ground is also giving all Darkspawn plus 8% death blow resist. And it comes with its own pros and cons both in and out of dungeon. As an example, stress healing will be much lower in the Cloister, Transept, and Penance Hall, and healing done and stress healing done by religious characters is also considerably nerfed on somebody who has the disease. However, you are also going to take on less of a stress penalty from transformations involving the Abomination and Voivode, more stress healed from the Succubus class. So it seems like there could be a lot of fun had with a Voivode and his troop of trusty vampires. A full torchless run with a bunch of different Darkspawn sounds pretty fun to me. That's going to do it for this overview of the Voivode. Huge congratulations to Von Kroluk and Carnifex, who've put together a class that feels, looks, and sounds very polished. Let me know in the comments below how you guys are using the Voivode. How are you playing it? What trinkets are you taking along with it? And with what group compositions? As always, I'll include just below the video the download link for the Voivode, its standalone district, and the guide overview on how to deal with the Darkspawn disease. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more mod overviews and all things Darkest Dungeon. Thanks everybody, we'll see you next time.